The night began with laughter. The air shimmered with the warmth of chandeliers, glasses clinking like delicate bells, and the rhythm of music pulsing against velvet walls. It was the kind of evening that looked perfect from the outside, flawless, effortless, rehearsed. Yu Menglong arrived late, apologizing with that soft, modest smile that had made him famous. His presence carried quiet grace, the kind that drew people in without words. He thought it was another celebration, another night of meaningless talk and empty promises. He had no idea that he was walking into the jaws of his own destruction. Fanji greeted him first. Her red dress shimmered under golden light, every step calculated, every glance rehearsed. Her perfume, the sweet scent of jasmine, floated between them as she leaned in for a gentle embrace. "You made it," she said, her voice honeyed, her eyes glacial. Behind her stood Chang Song, holding a glass of whiskey with a grin that stretched too wide to be genuine. At the corner of the room, a man with crimson hair adjusted the lens of his camera. He was known as the director, always filming, always smiling, claiming that every moment deserved to be immortalized. What Yu did not know was that this night was not meant for memory, it was meant for evidence. Yu took his seat near the center of the table. The soft hum of conversation surrounded him, familiar faces masking unfamiliar intent. Beneath the table, his dog rested quietly by his feet, tail wagging with innocent trust. He smiled down at her, grateful for that simple, loyal presence. The others laughed, raising their glasses to toast to success, to friendship, to lies. The music softened. The scent of jasmine grew stronger. Fan Shi refilled his glass, her fingers brushing his wrist with a tenderness that almost felt sincere. "You work too hard, Yu," she said softly. "You should learn to enjoy yourself." He chuckled, polite and unsuspecting. "Perhaps you are right." He did not notice the camera light blinking red. He did not see the look that passed between Song and the director. The room was a stage, and he had just stepped into his final performance. As the night unfolded, the laughter lost its rhythm. The light grew harsh, the air heavy. Words turned sharp, gestures grew tense. When Yu finally stood up, dizzy from the drinks that tasted too bitter, something inside him stirred a faint warning, too late to matter. The silence that followed was suffocating. Every smile vanished. Every friendly gaze turned into a stare of accusation. "Where is the USB?" Chang Song asked, his tone stripped of warmth. Yu blinked, confused. "What USB?" Fan Shi's hand slammed the table, the sound slicing through the room. "Do not lie, you know exactly what we want." "It's Israel." He took a step back, his pulse quickening. "I swear I do not." The first blow came fast, a heavy strike that knocked the glass from his hand and sent shards scattering across the floor. The dog barked, startled, trying to protect him. Fan Shi turned toward the animal, her face a mask of cruelty, and without hesitation lifted a metal rod from the corner. The sound that followed shattered something deeper than silence. Yu screamed as the dog fell lifeless beside him. His hands shook violently as he reached toward her, but a hand grabbed his hair, forcing his head down. "Please," he gasped. "Stop." "Then give us the drive," the red-haired director said. Camera steady, capturing every flicker of pain. "I do not have it," Yu choked out, blood already running from his lip. "Then tell us who does," Fan Shi demanded. Her voice no longer sounded human. The beating began. Every question was punctuated by a strike. Every refusal met with another blow. His body folded under the weight of their rage, yet his eyes still searched for mercy. None came. They stripped him of strength and dignity, forcing him to kneel, forcing him to confess to crimes he had not committed. The floor beneath him grew slick and red. The smell of liquor and blood merged into something unbearable. "You think you are loved?" Fan Shi sneered, crouching to meet his gaze. "You are nothing but a product. You shine until they find someone brighter. Then they crush you." And so he looked up at her, eyes filled with disbelief and heartbreak. "Why? What did I ever do to you?" She smiled coldly. "You said no. You refused the wrong people." The director zoomed in, his camera recording every shudder, every drop of blood, every broken breath. Yu's pain became their theater. His agony became their entertainment. The cruelty was methodical, rehearsed, almost sacred. When they tore off his fingernails, he stopped screaming. His voice dissolved into broken gasps. Every inch of him trembled with pain, but he refused to give them what they wanted. "I do not know," he whispered. "I do not know." His words came like a prayer, like a final surrender. The city outside carried on, oblivious. Music drifted from distant bars, headlights traced patterns across the walls, and somewhere below, people laughed. Life continued as his ended. Fanshi stood, wiping her blood-stained hands with a napkin. "Take care of it," she said simply. The men obeyed. They lifted Yu's body, weak but still breathing, dragging him toward the balcony. The wind outside roared like a warning. He opened his eyes one last time. For a brief moment, he saw the city, the skyline he had once dreamed about as a boy. The lights blurred through tears, glowing gold and red like a farewell. He thought of his mother, of her tired smile, of the songs he used to sing for her. Then they pushed him. Silence. Then the dull thud that ended everything. The night that began with laughter ended with death. But the story did not end with him. Within days, the apartment was cleaned, the walls painted, the blood erased, the dog was buried in secret. The headlines called it an accident. A young actor, exhausted, gone too soon. The news faded as quickly as it appeared. The world moved on. Only one person did not. Bea saw the video, 7 minutes of horror, 7 minutes that destroyed her sleep forever. She watched Yu's last breath, his last glance, his last attempt to live. The camera never looked away, neither could she. From that night forward, she carried his voice in her mind, his eyes in her dreams, and a promise that refused to fade. She would not forget, she would not forgive, she would speak. And so, beneath the same golden lights that once hid his suffering, the first whisper of truth began to rise. It began as a rumor, a whisper moving through digital corridors where light seldom reached. A nameless file surfaced one night on the dark web, spreading from account to account like a virus. It had no title, no description, only a string of meaningless numbers and letters. Those who opened it said they wished they never had. It was not a film, not a performance, but a recording of real death. It was the final 7 minutes of Yu Menglong's life. At first, no one believed it. People had seen too many deepfakes, too many hoaxes built on tragedy. But this was different. The video carried an undeniable weight, an authenticity that could not be fabricated. The camera was steady at the start, the lighting too natural, the sound too raw. Laughter filled the room at first, familiar voices echoing through the speakers. Then came the shift. The laughter stopped, replaced by gasps and the sound of impact. The camera focused on Yu, slumped in a chair, bruised, trembling. Behind him stood 2 men and a woman in red. The woman smiled at the camera before speaking. Her voice was calm, casual, as if she were performing for an audience. "Ask him again," she said. The words slid through the speakers like ice. What followed was not cinema. It was cruelty stripped of all disguise. Every blow, every plea, every whisper of pain was captured in perfect detail. No cuts, no edits. Just truth. Those first viewers became silent witnesses. Forums erupted in panic. Some tried to delete the file after watching, but it was too late. It had already been copied, mirrored, renamed thousands of times. Each attempt to erase it only multiplied its existence. The more it was suppressed, the faster it spread. Within hours, the video had escaped the dark web and flooded the surface world. Bea found it by accident. She had been scrolling through anonymous threads, following vague rumors about Yu's disappearance. When she clicked the link, her screen filled with static before revealing the scene. At first, she thought it was fake, but the moment she saw his eyes, those gentle, familiar eyes clouded with fear, her breath stopped. She watched until the end, frozen, tears streaming silently as the sound of his body hitting the ground filled the speakers. When the screen went black, she could still hear the echo. She screamed. It was not just grief. It was something deeper, primal, a sound that came from the part of the soul that recognizes injustice as clearly as pain. She knew every face in that room. Fan Shi, Chang Ching Song, the red-haired director, they were all there. The same people who had once called him a friend. And behind them, that blinking red light, the symbol of power, the silent witness that would become the world's proof. Bea trembled as she replayed the video, unable to stop herself. The longer she watched, the more she noticed the flicker of the chandelier, the sound of rain outside, the faint reflection of the city skyline in the glass doors behind Yu. Every detail was real. Every sound was verifiable. It was not a movie set, it was an apartment. His apartment. Someone had leaked the truth. Within hours, hashtags began to appear online, coded at first, then bold. Number, Justice for Yu Menglong. Number, The Video. Number, Truth Cannot Die. Each post was deleted almost as soon as it appeared, but the message had already escaped. Screenshots were saved. Files were re-uploaded. Hidden servers stored copies in dozens of languages. The more the authorities tried to silence it, the louder it became. Commentators began dissecting every frame. Tech experts enhanced the lighting, matched the furniture to photos from real estate listings, and compared the wallpaper pattern to the one in Yu's last social post. Everything matched. No one could deny it any longer. The accident had been a lie. He had been murdered, and the world had watched it happen. The outrage was instantaneous. People demanded arrests, investigations, accountability, yet the officials stayed silent. News networks ignored the footage. Entertainment companies released statements of mourning without mentioning the video at all. He was a kind soul, they said. He will be missed, but the truth was already too large to bury. For some, the video became a form of twisted entertainment. Reaction clips surfaced filled with tears, screams, and disbelief. Others treated it as sacred evidence, something that should never be touched or spoken over. In the corners of the web, people began calling it the confession. They said it was not Yu who confessed, but the world that had killed him. Bea could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, the bruises, the way his hands trembled as he tried to speak. The final flicker of defiance before the darkness took him. She heard his voice in the silence, whispering not for help, but for remembrance. It was not a haunting. It was a command. She started to speak publicly. Her first video was shaky, recorded late at night with tears still visible on her cheeks. I saw what you all saw, she said softly. But I saw something more. He looked at the camera before he fell. He looked at us. It was not fear, it was trust. He believed someone would see the truth. Her words spread faster than the original footage. Viewers shared her clip across languages and continents. Some called her a liar, others called her brave, but no one could ignore her. She became the voice of the voiceless, the one who refused to let the silence win. As days turned into weeks, chaos grew. The government began deleting entire networks. Accounts vanished overnight, but the internet had already adapted. Users created encrypted archives, shared links through coded messages, and hid copies of the video in art files, music tracks, and game data. Each time one version was erased, another appeared. The web itself had become a living memorial. A rumor began to spread, a legend that those who watched the entire video could hear Yu's voice afterward, whispering through their headphones. Some claimed it was a glitch. Others said it was his spirit reaching out through the digital void. Bea did not doubt it. The night she watched it again, the lights in her apartment flickered, and for a brief second she heard it, a faint whisper, almost too soft to be real. Thank you. From that moment, she knew her purpose. The video was no longer a recording of death. It was a message carved in pixels, a final performance that refused to fade. It was proof of cruelty, yes, but also proof of endurance, of truth that could not be buried beneath lies. Yu Menglong's final act was not silence. It was defiance. And as millions watched, cried, and raged, something irreversible began to stir. The world was waking up. Sleep became impossible. The images would not leave her. Every time Bee closed her eyes, she saw Yu Menglong's face, the bruises, the trembling, the final flicker of life before the screen went black. The sound of his voice, broken and pleading, echoed through her mind like a melody she could not stop replaying. At first, she thought it was guilt. She told herself that it was normal, that anyone who had watched that video would be haunted. But soon, she realized this was not imagination. This was presence. The haunting began softly. The first night, Bee woke to the sound of a cello playing somewhere in her apartment. It was faint, distant, yet unmistakably the same instrument Yu had played in his live streams years ago. The melody was mournful, lingering, filled with sorrow that felt alive. She searched the entire room, heart pounding, but found nothing. No music, no phone, no source. When she returned to bed, the sound stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Days blurred into nights. Bee spoke less to people and more to shadows. She began writing everything she felt, every chill in the air, every flicker of light, every whisper that brushed past her ear. Her notebook filled with words that did not feel like hers. Some were written in handwriting she did not recognize. On one page, she found a sentence she could not remember writing. "Do not let them forget me." It was not long before she heard his voice clearly for the first time. It happened one evening when she sat by the window, staring at the city lights. The air shifted and the curtains swayed, though the window was closed. Then came the voice, soft and fragile, but unmistakable. "They silenced me," it said. "They thought they could erase me, but truth cannot die." Bee froze, breath trembling. "Who are you?" she whispered. The reply came like a sigh through her bones. "You already know." Her tears came before her fear. She did know. Somewhere deep inside, she had been waiting for him. The weight in his tone was unbearable, not anger, not vengeance, but sorrow, the kind that only the dead could carry. She wanted to believe it was her mind, a trick born of exhaustion. But when she turned to her desk, she saw the candle flicker violently, its flame bending sideways as though pushed by an invisible breath. "You are here," she whispered. Silence answered, but she felt it, a presence standing behind her, close enough that the air grew cold against her skin. That night, she dreamed of him. It was not like other dreams. There were no colors, no sound, only dim light and the feeling of standing in the same room from the video. Yu sat in a chair, the same chair where he had suffered, yet his face was calm now, his eyes gentle. When he looked at her, the pain disappeared. "Do not fear me," he said. "Fear forgetting." She tried to speak, but no words came out. "You saw the truth," he continued. "You heard me when others refused. Now I need you to speak." When Bee woke, her pillow was wet with tears. The clock read 3:33 a.m., and the candle on her desk had burned to its end. In the wax, she noticed something strange, a small shape, perfectly formed, like the outline of a human eye. The haunting grew stronger after that. Sometimes she would feel a hand resting lightly on her shoulder, though no one was there. Sometimes she would find objects moved her notebook open, her pen placed neatly on a new blank page. Once, she discovered a faint trace of condensation on her mirror, forming the words, "You listened." She no longer doubted. Yu Menglong was reaching out from whatever place lay beyond the reach of the living. And his message was clear. He wanted truth to live. Bee began to record herself each night, documenting the strange events. Her followers, drawn by curiosity and fear, watched as she described the shadows that flickered behind her, the whispers that called her name. Many mocked her. Others accused her of exploiting tragedy. But among the noise were those who believed. They felt it too, the same invisible weight that pressed down whenever they watched the video. "You are not imagining it," she said during one live stream, her voice trembling. "When you see him, when you hear him, it is not just memory, it is him." The comment section filled with chaos, some typing prayers, others insults, many confessing that they too had seen him in their dreams. Yu's image had become something beyond fame, beyond fear. He was not a ghost of vengeance. He was a voice refusing to be buried. One night, Bee asked the question that had haunted her since the beginning. Why me? She whispered into the darkness. The answer came softly, so close it felt like it brushed against her skin. Because you listened. From that moment, she felt him everywhere. When she walked through crowded streets, the air grew colder beside her. When she typed, her fingers seemed guided by another will. She began writing words that carried truths she could not possibly know, details about the night he died, names of people she had never met. When she read them back, she realized they were confessions. He told her about the meetings in hidden rooms, the laughter that masked cruelty, the rituals of submission. He told her how they promised him freedom if he obeyed, and how he refused. He told her that his death was never random. It was punishment for rebellion. Sometimes she would cry as she wrote, her tears smudging the ink. Why are you telling me this? She asked once. So they will not win, Yu replied. They think silence is power, but memory is stronger. Bee began to share his words online. She posted fragments, quotes, thoughts, lines that felt like poetry but carried truth beneath them. They killed my voice but not my song. Fear is the language of the powerful. The dead speak louder than the living. The post spread quickly, copied, and translated across the world. People began to quote Yu Menglong again, as though he were still alive. But as his presence grew, so did the danger. Bee started receiving anonymous messages. Stop speaking. You do not know what you are awakening. Forget him or join him. Her phone rang at midnight with no one on the other end. Her car alarm went off without reason, yet she refused to stop. If I am afraid, she said in one recording, then I am still alive. And if I am alive, I will speak. The haunting no longer frightened her. It became a partnership, a shared mission between worlds. She felt his sorrow, but also his strength. When she cried, she could almost feel him comforting her. When she faltered, he would whisper, "Do not stop." The night he first called her by name, the temperature dropped until she could see her breath. "Bee," he said, voice trembling with both grief and gratitude. "They tried to erase me, but now you carry me. Remember, truth is not revenge. Truth is resurrection." The candle flickered once, then steadied. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I will not forget." And somewhere beyond the veil of the living, Yu Menglong smiled, because memory, once awakened, can never die. The night he told her about the ritual, the air in Bee's apartment changed. It was heavier, colder, as if the walls themselves had begun to breathe. The candlelight bent backward, shadows stretching too far, reaching like fingers toward her notebook. Yu Menglong's voice came softly at first, trembling in the static of her recorder, then clearer, sharper, as though he were standing inches away. "They called it a gathering," he whispered. "But it was not a party. It was a ceremony for monsters who wore human skin." Bee's hand shook as she pressed the pen to paper. "Tell me," she said. He obeyed. The memory began with an invitation. It had arrived one evening when Yu was still alive, an embossed card sealed with a golden insignia shaped like a serpent eating its own tail. The words were simple, an exclusive celebration of success. Attendance required. He had hesitated, but his manager insisted. "You cannot refuse," the man said. "These are the people who built you." So Yu went. The place was an estate on the edge of the city, surrounded by walls too high to climb and guards who never smiled. The air smelled of perfume and wine. Inside, everything gleamed. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, faces painted with the illusion of nobility. The guests wore masks of gold and silver, each carved with inhuman expressions, smiles too wide, eyes too narrow. "It was beautiful," Yu said, his voice distant, "but the kind of beauty that hides something rotten beneath." They led him into a circular chamber built entirely of black marble. Dozens of candles burned along the walls, their flames reflected endlessly in the polished stone. At the center was a symbol drawn in salt and blood, a spiral intertwined with unfamiliar markings. The chanting began quietly, a rhythmic hum that vibrated through his bones. Then a voice, deep and steady, rose above the rest. Welcome, vessel, it said. They made me stand inside the circle, Yu continued. My hands were bound with silk ribbons. It looked ceremonial, but the fabric cut into my skin. I could feel blood under the silk. A woman stepped forward, her mask shaped like a serpent. Her perfume was strong enough to make him dizzy. In her hands she carried a silver bowl filled with dark liquid. Drink, she commanded. He obeyed. The taste was thick, metallic, like iron and smoke. Within seconds, his vision blurred, and the room began to tilt. The chants grew louder, the flames flickered blue. The people around him started to move in rhythm, their shadows twisting and merging until they no longer looked human. They said my name, Yu whispered. Not like a person's name, but like a word in a spell. B could barely breathe. What did they do to you? They took something, he said. I do not know what. My strength, my will, maybe my soul. The leader approached him, a tall man wearing a mask with two faces, one smiling, one crying. His robe shimmered like oil under candlelight. He placed a gloved hand on Yu's forehead and whispered words in a language Yu could not understand. It felt like the air was being pulled from my chest, Yu said. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My heart stopped for a moment. I remember hearing it slow, then silence. B's hand froze. You died, she whispered. Maybe, he replied, maybe that was when part of me stopped belonging to the living. Dan. He described seeing flashes of light, faces that melted into shadows, eyes that glowed red from behind the masks. They were feeding, he said. I could feel it, their hunger. They feed on pain. That is how they stay young, powerful, untouchable. B wanted to stop writing, but her hand moved on its own. The words poured out, faster than thought. The candle flickered violently, throwing monstrous silhouettes across the walls. They told me that if I obeyed, I would have everything: fame, love, eternity. But I refused. Yu said. They smiled when I said no. They said, my refusal made me sacred. Then they began the ritual again, this time with me as the offering. The leader raised his hand, and the chanting stopped. In the silence that followed, Yu heard something wet fall to the floor. He looked down and saw his reflection in a puddle of blood, not his own, but someone else's. They had done it before, he whispered. I was not the first. The man with two faces leaned close. Pain is the key, he said. It opens the gate between what is seen and what is hidden. He pressed his gloved hand against Yu's chest. Now Yu belonged to both. Yu remembered collapsing, the marble cold beneath him, the world spinning into darkness. When he woke, he was lying in his own bed. The clock showed dawn. There were bruises on his wrists, marks that matched the silk ribbons. His phone had dozens of missed calls from his manager. You did well, one message said. They are pleased. He wanted to believe it was a nightmare, but the pain in his body told him it was real. From that day on, he noticed changes. When he looked into mirrors, his reflection lagged slightly behind his movements. He felt watched even when alone. And sometimes, at the edge of his vision, he saw shapes, faces hidden in smoke, eyes that glowed faintly like embers. They followed me, Yu said. Everywhere. In studios, hotels, even at home, I could feel them when I sang, when I slept. They called it a blessing, I called it a curse. B sat motionless, tears sliding down her face. The room felt colder with each word. Who were they? She asked. He hesitated. They are the ones who own the stage, the ones who decide who rises and who falls, the ones who believe that art is power and power requires sacrifice. The candle on B's desk cracked, spilling wax across the table. The flame bent sideways, casting two shadows on the wall, hers and another standing just behind her. She did not turn. She did not have to. They will do it again, Yu said. They never stop. They hide behind contracts and cameras, behind smiles and applause. But beneath it all, the circle remains. His voice grew fainter, layered with echoes that did not belong to him. I was supposed to become one of them, he said. Instead, I became their mirror. That is why they killed me. That. Bee's pen slipped from her hand. The sound of it hitting the desk was deafening. The shadows on the wall moved, as if breathing. You, she whispered, why are you showing me this? So you will tell them, he answered. So the next time the circle opens, the world will not look away. Then the candle went out. Bee sat in darkness, heart racing, surrounded by the echo of drums that seemed to come from beneath the floor, slow, rhythmic, ancient. She realized that what Yu had shown her was not just memory, it was prophecy. Somewhere out there, behind the screens and lights, the circle still waited. And it would open again. The truth arrived not as revelation, but as corrosion, slow, invasive, undeniable. Each night, as Bee listened to Yu Menglong's voice emerge from the static, she felt the weight of a system too vast to comprehend pressing against her chest. His words no longer sounded like ghostly whispers. They carried the precision of a confession, the detail of someone who had seen an empire from the inside and lived long enough to describe it before it consumed him. They do not make stars, Yu said. They manufacture obedience. Those 6 words changed everything. He explained that the entertainment industry was never what it appeared to be. The lights, the fame, the laughter, it was all theater. Behind the cameras was a structure built on control, perfected over decades. The producers smiled on television while signing contracts that bound lives in invisible chains. Agencies called it protection. In truth, it was ownership. Once you signed, you belonged to them. They start with promises, Yu said. Fame, money, love, security. They study your weaknesses, your family, your fears, your hunger for recognition. They give you everything you dream of, then take everything you are. It's let's. Bee wrote each word with trembling hands. You told her how every actor, every singer, every model was monitored. They decide what you wear, how you speak, what you believe, he said. They control who you love. If you fall for the wrong person, they destroy you. If you defy them, they erase you. Bee asked, how do they erase someone? Silence, you replied. First, they cut your interviews. Then your shows. Then your name disappears from search results. Your friends stop answering calls. You are alive, but no one can see you. You become a ghost before you die. He had seen it happen. He spoke of a young actress who refused to attend a private meeting with an investor. She vanished, he said quietly. They told the press she retired to pursue education. But I saw her phone left behind in the dressing room. She was one of the lost. Bee felt the air grow colder with every story. The lost, she repeated. Yu's voice dimmed. The ones who disappear. The ones who refuse to kneel. He told her about the studios beneath the city rooms without windows, doors without handles. People taken there were retrained. They returned smiling, compliant, hollow. Some never returned at all. They keep files, he said. Videos, recordings, contracts, signed with fear. Every secret becomes a leash. The more he spoke, the clearer the structure became. At the top sat the benefactors, faceless owners who controlled entire networks of agencies and companies. Beneath them were the directors, the ones who decided which artists shined and which vanished. Then came the enforcers' bodyguards, managers, handlers. They are the ones who make you obey, you said. They smile for the public, but their hands are always red. Bee could barely keep up with his pace. Her pen scratched across the page until the words blurred together. Why you? She asked. Because I said no, he replied. Because I told them I wanted to leave. He had planned his escape carefully. He wanted to earn enough from his final film to disappear, to live quietly with the person he loved, away from the cameras. But they found out, he said. They always find out. It started with messages. Anonymous, polite, threatening, do not forget who made you. Then came the replacements, his manager, his driver, even his assistants, all new, all chosen by them. His phone began to glitch. His home security system stopped recording. He saw the same black car outside every night. They watched me, you said. Even when I slept, I could hear the clicks of their cameras in the dark. Bee's blood ran cold. Why didn't you tell anyone? He gave a bitter laugh. Who would believe me? When you are famous, paranoia looks like madness. They count on that. Yu described how even his fans were used against him. Some were hired to follow him, not out of admiration, but as surveillance. They sent reports about me, what I ate, where I went, who I met. Some of them did not even know they were part of it. They thought they were helping. Bee's heart ached. Was the USB real? She asked. Yes, he answered. It held everything. Names, transfers, recordings. Proof that the empire feeds on silence. He had hidden it, terrified that if they found it, they would destroy him completely. It was my only weapon, he said. And they killed me to take it. Bee's hands shook. Is it still out there? Yes, Yu whispered, and they are still searching. His tone hardened, no longer fragile. They believe power is eternal, but power built on fear always collapses. They fear only one thing, memory. That is why they erase us. Bee felt the truth burn through her. It was not superstition or madness. It was a system of slavery disguised as art, a network of control that used beauty as bait and fear as leash. Every performance, every smile, every perfect photo was currency in their empire of illusion. They use us to distract you, Yu continued. While you chase our perfection, they build their thrones. His words lingered in her mind long after his voice faded. That night, she stood at her window, staring at the glowing skyline. Each light looked like an eye watching her, each shadow a secret. She imagined the studios below the city, the halls filled with the laughter of those who believed they were safe. When she finally spoke again, her voice trembled with rage. They cannot control truth. Yu's reply came like a whisper, carried by the wind. Then make truth louder. From that night on, Bee stopped calling it haunting. She called it awakening. She began to write everything he told her, line by line, turning horror into testimony. She sent pieces of it to trusted friends, to hidden archives, to strangers who believed. And somewhere in the unseen corners of the web, a message began to appear beneath every image of Yu Menglong. They built an empire with chains, but every empire falls. Bee looked at those words and understood. His story was not only about death. It was about the machinery of control and the first crack that had just begun to break its surface. Truth often hides in plain sight. For months after Yu Menglong's death, the world replayed his last interviews, fan meetings, and music videos without realizing they were watching a man slowly disappear. It was only when Bee began to study his image frame by frame that the illusion shattered. Every smile, every gesture, every silence was evidence. The body, she learned, keeps its own record of suffering. She started with a collection of public clips, old talk shows, red carpet appearances, casual live streams. At first glance, nothing seemed strange. Yu looked as he always had, calm, kind, impossibly composed. But when she slowed down the footage, she saw the fractures. His right hand trembled slightly when he reached for a glass. His left sleeve always covered his wrist, no matter the season. When he laughed, his eyes did not follow. The body can lie, but not perfectly. In one interview, the host playfully touched his shoulder. Yu flinched barely, but enough. The movement lasted less than a second, but Bee caught it. She replayed the clip until the frame blurred. He had tried to turn the motion into a smile, to mask the instinct of fear, but it was too late. Pain had memory. It betrayed him even when he performed. Another recording showed him performing at a fan event, dressed in pale yellow and white, colors chosen to make him appear radiant. But his posture was rigid, his hands tucked inside his pockets as though protecting something fragile. The mask he wore covered half his face, supposedly for fashion. Bee zoomed in. Beneath the edge of the mask, his skin was darkened, swollen. Not shadows, bruises. She remembered the words he had whispered from beyond the grave. They feed on pain. It was not a metaphor, it was truth. And his body had carried that truth for everyone to see. Bee moved through hours of footage, her eyes red from exhaustion, her heart sinking deeper with every revelation. In one clip, he lifted his arm to wave at fans, and the cuff of his shirt slipped just far enough to reveal a thin burn mark around his wrist. In another, the corner of his smile faltered when the cameras flashed too brightly, as if the light itself hurt him. These were not the signs of a man exhausted by work. They were the scars of a man surviving captivity. She compiled the images into a folder labeled Proof of the Living Dead. Each file was named by date and emotion: June, interview, fear, concert, smile, false, fan event, eyes empty. It became an archive of pain disguised as performance. When she shared her findings online, the reaction was explosive. Fans who once adored his calmness now saw resignation. What they thought was grace was actually control. What they called humility was obedience. The internet fractured into two sides: those who wanted to believe the illusion and those who could no longer unsee the truth. He was trying to tell us, Bee wrote in one post. We applauded his suffering. Her words spread like wildfire. Thousands began analyzing footage themselves, uncovering more hidden signs: faint swelling beneath makeup, stiff movements during concerts, moments when he pressed his hand to his chest as if steadying his breath. The pattern was undeniable. Yu Menglong had been documenting his own imprisonment, using his body as the last weapon he had left. One night, while scrolling through an old live stream, Bee froze. The video showed Yu in his apartment, chatting with fans as he played a soft tune on his cello. He smiled and thanked them for their love. Then, as he leaned forward, the light caught the corner of his wrist again, the same burn mark, faint but visible. For a second, he glanced directly into the camera. His lips parted, and though there was no sound, Bee could read the shape of his words. Help me. Her hands went cold. It was not imagination. He had reached out, not through ghosts or dreams, but through the screen, through the same tool that had made him a star. She spent the following nights gathering everything she could find. Fans joined her, sending clips and screenshots, each one a piece of a larger puzzle. Together, they uncovered a map of torment hidden in plain sight. A photo from a magazine shoot showed him sitting awkwardly, his leg slightly bent, concealing a wound on his knee. Another concert still revealed traces of medical tape under his sleeve. Someone found a rehearsal video where he staggered briefly, catching himself before anyone could notice. Every piece told the same story. He had been hurt long before he died. The collective grief became movement. They called themselves the Watchers, people who would never again ignore the signs of silence. They saw themselves as his eyes in the world he had left behind. But Bee carried a heavier burden than any of them. She was no longer only looking at the evidence. She was feeling it. The haunting returned not as visions, but as sensations. Sometimes her wrists throbbed without cause. Sometimes her breath caught in her chest as if struck. It was as if his pain had crossed over, embedding itself in her flesh. She understood then that haunting was not only spiritual, it was emotional inheritance. She continued anyway. Her obsession became purpose. Every bruise she identified was another piece of testimony against the empire that had devoured him. The authorities dismissed her findings as conspiracy, claiming that lighting and stress caused the marks. But the people were no longer listening to officials. They were listening to the dead. In live streams, Bee spoke directly to her followers. Look carefully, she told them. You will see it. He was speaking all along, just not in words. It's once. Viewers slowed videos to half speed, freezing frames, studying the smallest tremors in his hands. They found sadness hidden in smiles, pain behind applause. They found proof of abuse that could no longer be disguised by lighting or makeup. And each new discovery was like a knife twisting in the conscience of those who had once adored him without question. Bee's apartment filled with screens showing Yu's face from every angle. She hardly slept, afraid of missing something. At times, she swore she could hear him humming the same soft cello melody that had played the night she first heard his voice. It came as comfort, not torment. You see me, the whisper said once faintly. Now make them see." Her tears fell freely. "I promise," she whispered back. Weeks later, one particular frame went viral. It was taken from Yu's final interview. In it, he smiled at the camera, eyes glistening, mouth forming a perfect curve. But when viewers zoomed in, they noticed a single tear forming at the edge of his eye, one that never fell. The still image became iconic, printed on posters, shared across continents. People called it the smile that lied. It became the face of truth. The empire tried to suppress it. Articles vanished. Hashtags disappeared. Yet each deletion only fueled the fire. The people were no longer consumers. They were witnesses, and witnesses do not forget. B pinned the image above her desk. Each morning she looked at it before writing. The smile reminded her that silence had never been absence, it had been defiance. "The body remembers," she wrote in her journal. "It remembers pain, betrayal, love, and truth. Even when the voice is gone, the body tells the story." And Yu's body had spoken louder than any scream ever could. It began not as protest, but as mourning. The people who had once adored Yu Menglong gathered online in grief, posting tributes, lighting candles, whispering his name like a prayer. Yet grief has a way of transforming. It does not stay soft for long. When truth is buried, mourning becomes rebellion. What started as sorrow turned into structure, and from that structure, a movement was born. They called themselves the archivists. It began with a single message on a private forum. "They can erase headlines, but they cannot erase us all." The word spread like a spark through dry air. Within hours, thousands had joined. Within days, they had built a network of mirrors and hidden servers repositories for every trace of Yu Menglong's life. Photos, videos, interviews, deleted posts, even fan letters, nothing was too small. Every detail was sacred. At the heart of it all was B. She did not choose to lead them. Leadership was forced upon her by conviction. Her broadcasts had turned her into a symbol of defiance. People saw her as the voice of Yu's ghost, the bridge between his suffering and their awakening. But she rejected the title of prophet. "I am not here to worship," she said in her first public address to the movement. "I am here to remember." The archivists operated in secrecy. They created encryption codes named after his songs, hiding evidence inside digital art, song lyrics, and ordinary images. When one server was shut down, another appeared within hours. They learned the rhythm of censorship and turned it into a map for resistance. "They delete faster than we can post," one member wrote, "but they forget truth multiplies." Their motto became simple, immortal. Light cannot be deleted. B watched the community evolve from grief to coordination. Programmers built algorithms to track deleted content. Artists turned screenshots into illustrations, embedding encrypted links into brushstrokes. Musicians remixed his voice into haunting symphonies that filled underground clubs with both sorrow and rage. The movement was no longer confined to fans. It drew lawyers, journalists, hackers, and activists. Each person brought a skill, and each skill became a weapon. The government responded the only way it knew how, with silence and deletion. Hashtags vanished. Accounts disappeared overnight. Some of the earliest members were detained for spreading false information. But every erasure became a monument. Their names were added to a growing list on hidden websites titled "The Ones Who Spoke." B refused to stop. "They cannot arrest everyone," she said during a live stream that reached millions. "They can take my voice, but not my echo." Her apartment became the nerve center of the revolution. Cables ran across the floor, walls covered in printed screenshots and coded phrases. The glow of monitors filled her nights. She slept little, ate less, and spoke only when necessary. The haunting presence of Yu no longer came as shadow or whisper, it had become purpose. When she hesitated, she heard him clearly. "Keep going." Soon, the movement crossed borders. Servers in other countries began mirroring their data. Independent journalists translated Yu's story into multiple languages. Anonymous artists projected his face onto skyscrapers at night, a ghost glowing over the cities that once ignored him. In one of the most viral moments, A projection of Yu's final smile appeared across a government building. Underneath, in bold letters, glowed the message, "You can kill a man, but not a memory." That image became immortal. Foreign outlets began covering the story. They called it the digital resurrection. Analysts dismissed it as hysteria. Others called it a new form of justice. To the archivists, it was neither. It was survival. If we stop, B told them, he dies again. One of the movement's most ambitious act came in the form of Project Lantern. It was a collective database containing everything, every recording, every document, every trace of Yu Menglong that the empire had tried to erase. The site opened with a black screen and a single phrase that glowed like fireflies in the dark. Light cannot be deleted. Within hours, millions visited the site. Within days, it was banned. Within weeks, hundreds of mirror versions appeared. The internet had become a graveyard and a cathedral at once, a place where truth was both buried and reborn. But defiance came with a price. B's phone began to ring in the middle of the night. The same number. No voice, just breathing. Her inbox filled with threats disguised as condolences. For your own safety, stop. One morning, she found her front door slightly open. Nothing was stolen, nothing moved. But the candle she always kept burning for you had been snuffed out. She recorded a message that night, her eyes tired but unbroken. "They want me to fear silence," she said. "But silence is what killed him. I will not give them what they want." Her followers responded with a flood of messages. "We are with you. We hear you. We remember." And so, when the authorities blocked her streams, others took her words and rebroadcasted them across the world. Her voice multiplied. It became unstoppable. Then came the night the world saw proof that Yu's spirit had not faded. B was live, speaking to thousands, when the lights flickered. The camera glitched, the image froze, and for a moment the outline of a man appeared behind her, tall, faint, glowing softly like smoke caught in light. She turned, tears filling her eyes. "You're here," she whispered. The figure remained for only a few seconds before vanishing. But that moment changed everything. The clip went viral across every platform. Viewers slowed it down, enhanced the lighting, and analyzed it endlessly. Some said it was a trick of reflection. Others swore they saw his face clearly. To the archivists, there was no doubt. "He heard us," one wrote. "He is with us." From that night on, the movement adopted a new name, the Resurrection. It was no longer just about Yu Menglong. It was about everyone who had ever been silenced, every artist destroyed by power, every voice forced into submission. His story had become the anthem of the forgotten. B stood at the center of it all, both proud and broken. She had not sought fame, but history had chosen her. She often sat in the dark, surrounded by screens filled with his image, whispering, "You started this. I'm only following." And somewhere, in the quiet between the hum of her machines and the pulse of the world outside, Yu's voice answered, soft, but certain. "We started this together." The archivists grew beyond borders, beyond languages, beyond fear. They no longer needed leaders. They had become one heartbeat, millions beating in unison, carrying the rhythm of a man who refused to vanish. And as the world tried desperately to erase him, the people built something the empire could never destroy, a collective memory strong enough to outlive death itself. Long before the cameras, before the applause and the hollow promises of fame, there was a small apartment on the edge of the city and the sound of a young boy singing to his mother. That was where Yu Menglong's story began, not in the spotlight, but in the quiet rhythm of struggle. His mother was a factory worker, her hands calloused, her back bent from long hours, yet her smile never faded when she heard her son's voice. She would tell him, "You have light in your throat, my boy. The world will hear it someday." He had promised her that he would make her proud, that one day she would never have to work again. And he kept that promise, though the world turned that dream into a nightmare. After Yu's death, his mother vanished from the public eye. No interviews, no public mourning, no words at all. The official said she wished for privacy, but B knew silence in that world was never a choice, it was punishment. For months, she searched for her, combing through hospital records, news archives, even whispers in online forums. Finally, she found a photo taken by a stranger, an older woman in black standing before an altar covered with white lilies, her face hidden by her hands. The caption read only, "A mother's grief." Bee printed the image and pinned it above her desk. "She's alive," she whispered. Yu had spoken of his mother in one of their earliest conversations from beyond the veil. His voice had softened when he said her name. "She is the only person who saw me as a person, not a product. When I sang, I was still her son. When they beat me, I prayed she would never see." Bee wept as she wrote his words. "Where is she now?" "She hides," Yu replied. "They told her to forget me. They think her silence will erase me." Bee clenched her fists. "They fear her." "Yes," Yu whispered. "They fear a mother's love more than any revolution. Because love does not stop when a body dies." Rumors began to circulate that Yu's mother had been taken away for protection. Others said she lived in a monastery under a different name. Still others claimed she visited his grave at night, bringing jasmine and candles, whispering his songs under her breath. There were no photos, only whispers, but every whisper carried faith. Then, one night, Bee dreamed of her. In the dream, the woman sat in a dimly lit room, a single candle flickering beside a framed photo of Yu. She traced his face with trembling fingers, whispering his name over and over, her voice breaking on every syllable. "You were a good boy," she said. "You only wanted to sing." Her tears fell onto the photograph, glimmering like glass. When Bee woke, her pillow was wet. The scent of jasmine lingered in the air. Yu spoke again the following night. His tone was softer than ever, filled with something deeper than sorrow. "She still cooks for me," he said. "She sets the table for two. She talks to my picture. She tells me to eat, as if I could." Bee covered her mouth to keep from sobbing. "She knows I am gone," Yu continued. "But she still waits. Every night she lights a candle. Every morning she prays that I am warm, wherever I am." Bee began to write everything down. She described the way grief had transformed Yu's mother into myth, how people began to call her the mother of the forgotten. It was not a title she asked for, but one the world gave her, because she had become more than a parent. She was a symbol of the millions who had lost someone to silence, whose tears had been buried beneath propaganda and lies. Then came the video. It appeared one morning without warning, less than a minute long, posted anonymously on a forum dedicated to Yu's memory. The footage showed an elderly woman standing before his memorial, holding a single white balloon tied with a ribbon. The wind tugged gently at her thin hair as she whispered, "Fly high, my child." Then she released it, and the balloon drifted upward into the gray sky until it vanished. The clip spread like wildfire. Everyone knew who she was. The government deleted it within hours, but it was too late. The image had already been saved, mirrored, immortalized. For millions, that moment became a prayer. The balloon floating toward the clouds was no longer just a symbol of loss. It was forgiveness, release, and rebellion all at once. Bee watched the video again and again, tears streaming down her face. She felt Yu's presence beside her, warm and gentle. "She still loves you," Bee whispered. "I know," Yu replied. "Tell her I am home." That night, Bee dreamed of them together. Yu stood beside his mother in a field of white flowers, sunlight breaking through the clouds. They were smiling, no bruises, no sorrow, no distance. "She can rest now," Yu said softly. "You gave her peace." When Bee woke, she found her room filled with the scent of rain and jasmine. On her desk, the candle she had left unlit now burned with a steady flame. She knew it was a sign their bond, no longer trapped between worlds, had finally found calm. But for the living, the image of the balloon endured. Artists painted it across city walls, children released their own balloons on the anniversary of his death. Musicians composed songs named after it. And in every act of remembrance, the love of one mother became the foundation of an entire movement's humanity. Bee wrote in her journal that week, A mother's grief is the last language the world cannot censor. Her words spread across the internet, carried by the same people who once feared to speak. In the months that followed, a legend began to grow. Some said the old woman still visited his grave each night. Others said she had passed away, finally reunited with her son. But no one could confirm either story, and maybe that was the point. Some truths are not meant to be proven, they are meant to be felt. The mother of the forgotten became eternal. Her love became faith. Her silence became power. And through her, the revolution gained its soul. For in the end, it was not rage or revenge that gave Yu Menglong's story its strength. It was love, pure, selfless, unbreakable love that defied every lie, every wall, every attempt to bury the truth. Love, be realized, is the one thing the empire could never own. Justice does not always arrive with handcuffs or headlines. Sometimes it comes as coincidence, too deliberate to be random, too poetic to be chance. In the months that followed the uprising of the archivists, a strange pattern began to unfold. The powerful who had once mocked the truth started to fall, one by one, undone by the very forces they had unleashed. The people called it fate. B called it balance. Yu Menglong called it the law of reversal. It began quietly. One morning, news broke that Fan Shi had been in a violent car crash. Her expensive car veered off a clear road and struck a concrete barrier. Witnesses said she had swerved suddenly, as if trying to avoid something that appeared in the middle of the lane. She survived, but her legs were shattered. When she awoke in the hospital, she refused to speak to anyone. She screamed at the nurses, saying someone had been standing in the road, someone with his eyes. B read the news and felt her chest tighten. That night, as she lit a candle, Yu's voice came through the static once more. She took everything she wanted by force, he said softly. Now she will learn what helplessness feels like. His tone was neither cruel nor vengeful. It was calm, inevitable, like gravity pulling justice into place. A week later, the red-haired director was found dead in his apartment. Official reports labeled it suicide, but the neighbors told a different story. They had heard him screaming the night before, shouting at someone to leave him alone. The police found his mirrors smashed, his phone destroyed. Written across the wall in red paint were 3 words, "I saw you." The footage circulated briefly before it vanished from the internet, but not before the archivists saved it. To them, it was not evidence of vengeance, it was proof that the world had begun to remember. Then came Chang Ching-song. Once adored by millions, she had withdrawn from public life after the scandal broke. But when she finally reappeared, it was not as the glamorous star people remembered. During a live charity event, she froze mid-sentence, staring directly into the camera with eyes wide in terror. Her lips moved, whispering something that the microphone barely caught. "He is here," she said, before collapsing. By the time the cameras cut away, she was gone. Her home was later found empty, her social accounts deleted, her name erased from every database. It was as if she had never existed. The empire called it tragedy. The people called it karma. B sat at her desk, candlelight dancing across her weary face. "You are doing this," she whispered. Yu's voice answered from the dark. "No, I am only the echo. What they created now consumes them." The law of reversal spread beyond the guilty. Executives lost fortunes overnight. Politicians resigned amid scandals that appeared from nowhere. Private emails leaked, contracts were exposed, and secret recordings surfaced in waves. Each revelation mirrored a sin. A producer who had exploited dozens of young artists lost everything when his offshore accounts were revealed. A powerful investor who had hidden behind charities was caught in the same kind of trap he once used against others. Every fall carried symmetry. Every ruin felt written by unseen hands. The media tried to rationalize it as coincidence. But the believers knew better. They said the world was finally recalibrating, that the same universe which had watched you suffering in silence now demanded payment from those who caused it. Some called it a curse. Others called it divine mathematics. B began to notice other signs. Cameras malfunctioned around the guilty. Screens flickered when Yu's name was mentioned. Security footage captured shapes that shouldn't have been there, reflections moving independently of the people they mirrored. Servers storing the Empire's data glitched, losing terabytes of information overnight. Technicians swore they heard faint music coming through their headsets, the same haunting cello melody that Yu once played. The law has awakened, Yu whispered to her. It does not punish, it remembers. One evening, B received an anonymous message. It contained a single attachment, a short, grainy video. The footage showed a corridor lit by flickering lights. The camera shook violently as someone ran, breathing hard. Then came a whisper. Help me. The screen went black, followed by a faint image of Yu's face, calm and luminous, appearing in the reflection of a window. The time has come, his voice said. The truth must no longer be feared. The file spread across the internet within hours. Authorities tried to delete it, but thousands had already downloaded copies. To many, it was just another haunting artifact. To the archivists, it was a signal. Yu's echo was no longer confined to B. It had spread into the world itself. Every screen, every device, every piece of technology that once helped the Empire control its people now carried fragments of the truth they had buried. The dominoes fell faster after that. Entire corporations collapsed as whistleblowers released evidence of exploitation and corruption. Celebrities once untouchable were exposed for complicity. The networks that had covered up Yu's murder imploded under the weight of their own secrets. Even those who had remained silent out of fear began to speak. It was as if a dam had burst, flooding the world with everything it was never meant to see. B watched it all unfold with a strange mixture of sorrow and awe. The world was burning, but for the first time, the flames felt cleansing. They are paying, she said quietly. Yu's reply came like a breeze against her ear. Payment is not freedom, he whispered. Awakening is. And she understood. The law of reversal was not about vengeance, it was about reflection. Each cruelty had returned to its maker. Each lie had found its way home. The universe was not cruel, it was symmetrical. Still, B wept. Retribution did not bring peace. It only revealed how deep the wounds went. Are you free now? She asked. There was silence. Then, softly, not yet. One truth remains. She looked toward the flickering candle and felt him there, standing behind her, as he had from the beginning. His voice was no longer trembling, no longer afraid. It carried weight, authority, and something almost divine. Justice is not revenge, he said. It is remembrance. The living must remember, or the dead will never rest. Outside her window, the city was silent. Neon lights reflected in puddles like fractured stars. Somewhere in that vast maze of glass and steel, the same system that had once buried him was crumbling from within. Bee pressed her hand against the window pane, feeling the cold seep into her skin. Then I will remember, she whispered, and I will make them remember too. The candle flared, its light casting two shadows, hers and his, side by side. For a brief moment she felt warmth, the kind that only truth can bring. And far above the city, where the night met the rising dawn, something unseen shifted. The world, at last, had begun to balance. Time passed, but the echoes did not fade. They rippled through the years, through screens and hearts, through generations that had not even been alive when Yu Menglong's voice first broke the silence. His death, once hidden beneath layers of lies and censorship, had become a pulse that the world could no longer ignore. The story of one man's suffering had transformed into something far greater, a collective awakening. Cities changed, governments changed, but his name endured. Murals of his face appeared on abandoned walls, painted in defiance during the night and left to glow in morning light. Street performers sang his songs in subway tunnels, their voices trembling yet strong. Candles burned beneath bridges, in schools, in homes where people whispered his story to their children. They called these gatherings the dandelion vigils, named for the flower that scatters but always returns. Every petal that drifted carried his name. Every flame that flickered declared the same vow: light cannot be buried. Bee no longer lived in hiding. The world had changed, and so had she. Her hair had turned silver, her eyes lined with exhaustion and wisdom. But her voice, soft, measured, eternal, still carried the truth. She had long stopped broadcasting nightly. She no longer needed to. The people had become their own broadcasters, their own witnesses. Memory had outgrown the messenger. The empire that once ruled through fear had collapsed under the weight of its own rot. The benefactors had vanished, hunted not by ghosts but by justice. Studios fell, agencies dissolved, courts reopened cases they had buried decades before. But be understood, something most did not. This was not victory, it was transition. Evil does not die, it evolves. They will build again, Yu had once told her, but now the world will know what lies beneath the gold. And the world did know. Knowledge had become its own kind of rebellion. Awareness itself was the curse no tyrant could undo. Bee became a writer. Her hands, once trembling with fear, now moved with conviction. She compiled every testimony, every leaked document, every voice that had dared to speak. She gathered the names of the lost, the erased artists, the silenced activists, the forgotten mothers, and wove them into a single book titled The Ones Who Remember. It was banned the day it was released, yet within hours it had spread across the world, shared in secret, printed illegally, whispered aloud in classrooms. The book did not glorify pain, it sanctified it. In its pages, Yu Menglong was no longer just a victim. He was the embodiment of resistance, the proof that memory could outlive power, that even a broken voice could echo loud enough to shatter an empire. The archivists evolved into a foundation. What had begun as a hidden rebellion became a global movement dedicated to truth in art and media. They built secure archives where stories like Yu's could never again be erased. They protected whistleblowers, funded investigative journalists, and created sanctuaries for those who spoke against corruption. Their logo was simple, a white dandelion glowing in the dark. Beneath it, their motto, "Light cannot be deleted." Every year, on the anniversary of Yu's death, the world remembered. There were no official ceremonies, no speeches, no government declarations. There was only silence, the kind that honors, not hides. In that silence, thousands of white balloons rose into the sky, each one carrying a single word written in ink: freedom. The sight of them filling the air became a new kind of anthem. Bee attended the vigil every year. She never stood at the front, never sought attention. She preferred the back of the crowd, watching others carry what she once had to bear alone. The first year, she cried until her hands shook. The second year, she smiled through tears. By the 10th, she simply stood still, letting the wind carry the scent of jasmine through the air. She often visited his grave, though it was not marked by grandeur. It was a simple marble stone surrounded by wildflowers, the ones that had managed to survive the city's gray decay. The engraving was minimal, his name, and beneath it the words he had once spoken to her in a whisper: "Light cannot be buried." Every visit felt like returning to the beginning and the end at once. One morning, years after the revolution had settled into history, she found something new on the grave. Someone had placed a cello bow wrapped in white silk upon the stone. No note, no signature. She smiled through tears. "You are still playing," she whispered. "Even now." Yu's voice no longer came as whisper or wind. It came through the world itself, in the laughter of children who grew up knowing his story, in the art of those who dared to create without fear, in the courage of those who refused to forget. In her final broadcast, streamed quietly from her small study, Bee sat before the camera one last time. The candle beside her burned steadily, its light soft and golden. "He does not belong to me," she said. "He belongs to all of you." He was one man who faced the darkness alone, but his courage gave birth to millions who will never be silent again. Her voice broke slightly, but she smiled. "We remember. We resist. We rise." The feed ended, but the echo did not. Across the world, people repeated her words like a pledge. That night, Bee dreamed of him. Yu stood in the same field of white flowers where she had once seen him with his mother. The air was bright, the sky endless. He was no longer the bruised man from the videos, but the young boy, again, the one who sang to the woman who believed in him. He turned toward her, smiling softly. You did it, he said. Bee shook her head, tears falling like rain. No, we did it. He nodded. Then it is time. The dream began to fade, the light swallowing everything. When Bee woke, her apartment was silent. The candle had burned itself out, leaving a thin curl of smoke drifting toward the ceiling. She walked to the window. Outside, the city shimmered beneath the dawn. Somewhere in the streets below, people were already gathering for the vigil, balloons in hand, candles in hearts. The world moved on, but not without memory. She smiled, pressing her hand against the glass. Light cannot be buried, she whispered. And somewhere in the hush between heartbeats, in the breath between worlds, his voice answered, calm and eternal. No, Yu Menglong said. It only waits to be seen. The wind lifted the curtains. The first light of morning filled the room. And for the first time in years, Bee felt peace. For in every voice that refuses silence, in every truth that survives the dark, in every act of courage that defies fear, Yu Menglong lives still. Not as a ghost, not as a myth, but as a light that cannot and will never be buried.